Matt.
Here.
Cool. Then Samantha. Okay, Alicia.
I'm here.
Cool. Nolan.
Here.
Cool. Jonna. Actually, she let me know that she would not be here. Colin. Here. Najla. Okay, and Joe.
Testing.
And I am present. This is Joe in here.
Perfect. Good to see all of you. Welcome to members of the public. So for next order of business is approval of the agenda. So I would entertain a motion on that.
Move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Alrighty, do I hear any opposition? Alrighty, then I guess it'll be unanimously approved. Next up, we have presentation from Colin, but doesn't seem like he's here. So we will, I guess, continue. And then if he arrives later, we can always jump to that. So next up is public comment. We have 15 to 20 minutes dedicated to that, 3 minutes per person. So if you are a member of the public and you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature and I'll call on you and you can say whatever you like.
The raise hand function.
It's okay if you can't find it. If you would like to go, Donald.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is the 50th anniversary year for the Environmental Commission. So we're getting far more active, trying to get out of the COVID malaise. So there's several things I want to try to quickly go through. One of which, of course, is we're reassessing our last general view of environmental status, which basically is looking at a number of metrics. It's been several years since this was done, and we're beginning to try to figure out what metrics and how to bring them into up to date. With COVID subsiding, another activity that the EC is involved in is its wildlife conductivity biodiversity corridor project, which a number of things that are critical to the Sustainability Commission and the city and objectives as of course, biodiversity is basically and the green space tree canopy, runoff, climate mitigation, and greenhouse gas mitigation. And in spite of the pandemic, largely working with somewhat outside of the commission, but supporting the concept of the corridor plan or project has been the joint effort by the city park department, MC Iris, Sycamore Land Trust volunteers, as well as volunteers from the neighborhood. We've worked out a relationship with the Sycamore Knolls Neighborhood Association and Sycamore Village. So, and trying now to do the expand into neighbors, but because of the volunteer work at Cascades, Griffey Park, Park Ridge, and Southeast Park, we've accomplished quite a bit as far as actually improving the biodiversity by getting rid of some of the invasive plants so that the native species and wildlife can grow and prosper. And as part of the 50th year of the anniversary effort, we're definitely increasing our outreach activity, planning a number of events and activities, contests to focus on environmental outreach. And again, our goals basically overlap so many of the sustainability commission. So we'll try to keep you updated as the year progresses. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely keep us updated. That sounds great.
And yeah, one thing I should have asked if there's anything that you need from us, just let us know.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Anyhow, that's it.
Cool. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to give a comment tonight? Alrighty, seeing none, we will move on to report from chair. I don't really have much to report on today. I just want to say, I'm excited to serve in this role as chair. I'm excited to work with all of you. As I said in an email, feel free to email me with any concerns or anything that you have that you want to be on our agenda at the next meeting or questions that you have. One thing that I am planning to, see how it goes. I'm going to see how it goes tonight with using the raise hand feature. But I've noticed some trouble in the past with everyone. By the way Zoom shows people on the screen, it makes it kind of difficult sometimes, I guess, for some people to pop up when they raise their hand. So I'm going to see how it goes tonight. But one thing I was considering doing is I'm on the IU Student Government Congress. And one thing that we use instead of raise hand at our meetings is our speaker, which I guess in this case would be the chair, will send like a lot, like when we have a discussion, people will put X's in the chat and that's the order that they'll speak in. And that way, the order is maintained of when people wish to speak. We make sure that we hit every person and people aren't being skipped or overlooked because they're not showing up on someone's screen. So yeah, I'm going to see how it goes tonight with the raise hand thing. But if that doesn't work out or you all feel that it's not working out, feel free to email me and we can definitely implement either the change that I just mentioned or some other change. If you have an idea that has worked for you, just let me know. But yeah, I'm excited to be in this role. And with that, I'll pass it on to Lauren for her report.
Thank you, Jarrett. I'll keep it short since we have a lot on the agenda tonight. I just wanted to thank you all for signing the letter of support for the climate action plan. If you're interested in seeing the full presentation, you can go to the CATS website, and it's about 45 minutes in is when the presentation of the climate action plan started to council. I'm happy to report that it was accepted 9-0 a couple of weeks ago in April, and the full plan is on the website. I look forward to continuing to engage with this commission on implementation, but in knowing that we have some other things further down on the agenda and some visitors to give a presentation, I will keep my comments short. So I think next we have Matt, if you have any updates you'd like to provide.
Before Matt goes, Joe, did you have something to say?
Yes, actually, just following up on your remark about using the raise hand feature, I just wanted to see if ending the share screen to return the video layout to the tiled position would help make hand raising more visible so there'd be more users on the screen. I know at least I, for one, have the agenda available in my own personal window. That was all I wanted to suggest. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider just because I think that part of the problem is from the shared screen, but at the same time, members of the public might not have easy access to the schedule. So something that we could do, I guess, is send a link to the schedule in the chat of the Zoom when the meeting begins. That way people have access to it through there. What is it? What does everyone think about that? Does anyone have thoughts?
I'm happy to switch back to tile mode if that's helpful.
We might have seen Matt if we did that.
Yeah, Matt.
Thanks. I just raised my hand visually and didn't use the raised hand feature initially, so that's my bad.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no, I agree with Joe that I think the gallery feature is nice for kind of conducting a meeting generally. Maybe just in addition to a link, just announcing for folks at the beginning if they're watching on CATS or elsewhere, like how and where to access the agenda for the meeting is a good thing to do as well. So that's it. And I appreciate all the thoughts, Jarrett, on how to make sure we hear from everybody and kind of in an equitable fashion. I think that's good.
Alrighty, cool. Then we will stick with this format then. And Matt, if you want to go for your report, that's
sure. Awesome. Yeah, not a whole lot to update on. Just a couple of high-level things, larger legislative items that are going through the council right now that I should mention, I suppose. The council's in the middle of a multi-day single meeting special session to consider amendments and new mapping of base zoning districts for the Unified Development Ordinance. We're probably most of the way through that. We're on the final 2 ordinances of 10 that had gone through public process, plan commission, et cetera. And those continue tomorrow and Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. With an end time of no later than 11. And the kind of few things we're still wrapping up are some amendments related to the allowance of duplexes within residential zones, and also then the map itself, which includes some new base zoning districts, including a multifamily student district and an R4 general urban district, among others. So that process is nearing an end, if not this week, probably in the next week or two. And then second is that the annexation process is restarting more or less from where it left off in 2017, when the state house intervened with special legislation targeting Bloomington's process that was ultimately ruled unconstitutional by the Indiana Supreme Court. So we were fairly early in that process in 2017 as a city. That process is a state prescribed process that applies to all cities. And we're kind of picking up from where we left off. There's some updating of financial plans or fiscal impact statements, I guess, essentially, and that sort of thing that need to be updated. And those are basically ready to go. I believe we'll be going out in the council's packet this Friday, and at our regular session next Wednesday, the 19th, we will adopt those 8 fiscal plans for the different proposed areas for annexation. Those areas, I'm sure if you just Googled City of Bloomington annexation, the dedicated page for it would come up and you could explore those things. The maps are not final. They can be shrunk and changed. It's just a starting point and they can't be expanded. So that's kind of the initial footprint, which includes a lot of former, what were formerly called areas intended for annexation, areas where city sewer had already been run, some of that kind of things, as well as some what sometimes folks call donut holes. There's a few unincorporated areas on the western side of the city that are wholly surrounded by incorporated city property. Thanks, Joe, for the link. And, there's just a lot of implications with the annexation process that impact really everyone and a lot of sustainability related things, whether it's how our community, greater community develops, in terms of economic development, housing, land use policies, over the coming years, as well as where transit might serve, for instance, and whether there's job centers that are currently outside city limits that could be served in that case under current restrictions of transit to city limits. City services like recycling could be expanded, as well as things like rental property inspections, which the city is able to do since it had a program in place before the state preempted those. Additionally, parks and trails and things like that have an impact on not just recreation, but our multimodal transportation network. So a lot of implications to this process and what we're looking at. I have a lot to learn about it still, and I'm really looking forward to engaging with both current city residents as well as folks within the possible areas for annexation on that process. So I'm not sure if that may just pique interest of BCOS members or the public generally. I'm not sure if there will be a particular or specific way for BCOS to plug in, although commissions are usually, or I guess have at their own initiative the ability to weigh in on things and tackle certain projects or items. So I just wanted to highlight those kind of two big items that are on our plate at the moment, and I think that'll do it for my report. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Next, we will move into new business. So first, we have a presentation from the homeowner education series. So Christy and Angela, if you want to take it away.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having us. My name's Christy Lindberg. I've been with the city on staff since 1999, 22 years now, as an educator, and I've also served on the Environmental Commission. Was on that for a good 14 years. And we also have tonight Angela Van Roy from HAND. If she'd like to go ahead and say a couple words about her background, we can get started. Unmute. There you go.
I am Angela Van Roy. I am the Neighborhood Services Program Manager for the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Development. I want a little shout out to Joe, who was in Citizens Academy last fall. Nice to see you. I have been working for the city for almost 2 years. In July, it'll be 2 years. So I'm kind of a newbie here. Am open to all sorts of new ideas for how we can do the things we've been doing for a long, long time. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is mostly Christy's baby, but I've jumped on board to assist and put input where I can, and I'll let her take it from here. Thanks.
Thanks, Angela. And over time, we've learned some things, and we just like to take these things that we've learned to the next levels. And in talking with Lauren and others around the city, we've put together a plan. It's just in the beginning stages, and we'd like to give you a heads up on what we're thinking. Over the time that we've worked with neighborhoods and homeowners, neighborhood associations, HOAs, and so on, we've noticed a pattern, especially in the way of stormwater. In other words, water that falls from the sky. Another word for that is runoff. And it's getting a little bit worse, as we've found out. I go out and interview people and give them money for grants. And three of the most common themes that we've heard them speak about is that, as I mentioned, the drainage and erosion have been getting worse over the past few years. That the major challenges are between, say, public and private interfaces, and that the city needs to do something about it. So we've been listening. And through these programs and more, we'd just like to present our thoughts on possibly putting together a program, an education series, if you will, to be presented either live and or on Zoom and recorded and available for people to access when they can. Some could be moderated and such that would address some of these challenges that we have before us. And again, basically climate change mitigation. And it's really kind of an opportunity to inform people on what's going on, to bring folks together, demystify city policies, explain a little bit about our codes and so on and so forth, UDO, plants, and a lot of people don't know about these, or there are some challenges. And basically to get everybody on the same page moving forward so that we can address these challenges in a more expansive, unified way. One thought is that we could possibly form a task force between the departments and some of the public and address these in a positive, proactive, and preventative manner. The city could be a bridge between these stakeholders. That could also include not only the city and public, but say developers, contractors, landscapers, and we could provide more education out there for these folks to understand more about how these processes work and head off problems in the past before they get to where some of them are right now. And it's not good in some areas. Topics would include there again, climate change and what it is, tips on working in your yards and with organizations, especially since the city is starting to encourage more multifamily housing. We need to get more education on there on how to make that happen. How to take care of ponds, stormwater ponds, landscaping, working with the city and our codes, helping these organizations as a resource, and providing grants. And we have a list of materials too. The timeline moving forward is starting about now. Angela and I are both working on our grants programs and they're coming right along. And so we're starting to think more about getting this program out. So the timing is good and we'd like to launch it maybe by the end of this summer. So that's just it kind of in a nutshell. Sorry, I went kind of fast, but Angela's going to speak next. And then we thought we'd open up to some question answers and get your thoughts on this and moving forward. Angela?
Thanks, Christy. So I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of what HAND, Housing and Neighborhood Development, my department does in ways that we might be able to move in more of a sustainable way. This is something that we're just starting to talk about in our department in terms of how we can do that. And I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the programming that we think might be a good place to start, and then ask if you all have any ideas, because you're much more experts in this realm than we are. So one of the main things that our department does is housing, and we have programs that are funded by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have, those are for low-income homeowners. We have an owner-occupied rehabilitation program, and we have an emergency home repair program. These are certainly ways in which we could either require or incentivize homeowners to use sustainable practices and materials. There's one place where we could help out a bit. We also have a rental inspection program. That's a very large part of what this department does. And we are charged with inspecting every single rental unit within the corporate limits of Bloomington between 3 and 5 years. They have different schedules. And again, possibly we could incentivize landlords to update, upgrade, make their materials and practices more sustainable. Me personally, I am in neighborhood services, and as Christy mentioned, I have a couple of grant programs, one of which is the neighborhood improvement grants. These are for larger capital projects that neighborhoods as a group or a neighborhood group of individuals within the neighborhood who are interested in doing something for the good of the community, for the good of their neighborhood, can send us a proposal and for a project. And so one of the things I've come across for feedback I've gotten from neighborhoods in the past is that oftentimes neighborhoods just don't know what kinds of projects they could do. And so we don't get a lot of applications some years because people just don't have ideas. So one of the ways I'd like to help in that regard is to come up with projects that would be sustainable projects, would be eco-friendly projects, that we could suggest and maybe put together some materials to help encourage people to think in those terms, and also to give them some ideas about projects that might be undertaken. One of the grant programs that I have just instituted this year, and so far has had some good feedback and good response, is a small and simple grant, which is just $500, which is not a lot of money, but it's enough sometimes to get people going. And this one is specifically designed to help neighborhoods remove invasive plants and replace them with natives. And so I've got a number of neighborhoods that are currently working on that as a project. You know, Don was talking earlier about Sycamore Knolls, where he lives. I'm doing a great initiative in that regard in the park. We are looking to try to get people to work in their own yards, and I am looking at a larger group of people in terms of a neighborhood, trying to get it to be a little bit bigger rather than just a little island of one person's property. So that's one of the things that we are doing at HAND that is more in a direction of being sustainable and helping out our environment. So, but we're really open to ideas. As I said, this is a conversation we're really just beginning, and would love to be able to be more proactive in our relationships with residents and the ways in which we can help them, the programs that we offer. So I would welcome comments from you all.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, if you want to go first.
Yeah, first, thanks for the presentation to you both. I appreciate that information and look forward to collaborating and helping with those things as much as possible. I have two thoughts. The first one is off the top of my head, one item that's come up that I think is appropriate for the programs that you just mentioned, Angela, about capital on a neighborhood scale, and that's already come up in, I believe, the Climate Action Plan, is the ability to improve soil rainwater absorption capacity through different types of cover cropping. So I think that's something that could be done on a multi-yard scale pretty easily, and something that I suspect citizens might not be as aware of as a potential project that would address stormwater absorption, particularly in this clay-rich soil that we have in this area. And the second is just a plain question for you both, is there any content available that we could review in terms of a lot of the initiatives and concepts that you just mentioned in this presentation that we could digest on our own time later? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for asking. I meant to mention that, but I do have 2 pages put together here already that I plan to go through after your comments and update and share with everybody. Good question.
Thank you. Is there a particular place we would be able to find those? Perhaps on the hand website or page?
I'm not sure yet. Well, I guess we'll speak with Lauren on how she'd like to get this information out, maybe through email or online, or we'll figure that out.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Others?
I was just going to add, I think it's great what you guys are doing, and I think that this group could definitely help you with project ideas. I think we would just need some time, to think it through.
Right.
Come up with a list. But yeah, I definitely think we could do that. I mean, we're already kind of brainstorming big ideas anyway, so I think this could tie into some of that stuff.
Agreed. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. I know several folks are with us on this, and all we need to do is really, I think, kind of shore it up a little bit. Right now, it's pretty big picture, and that's really where it needs to be right now. But over time, once we get more thoughts into it, it'll narrow down, and more of a plan will come into place.
Yeah, if anyone has ideas about educational directions that we could go for a video or a workshop, things that you have come across in your dealings with people and conversations that you've had that are needs and things where there's sort of a missing piece and people need more education, that would be a great way to sort of direct us as well. If you have those kinds of ideas, would welcome that. And Lauren knows how to reach both of us, so. Thanks.
Right. And we have a number of these written down already, but it's always good to hear from others too, from your perspective, so that we can make it as inclusive as possible.
When you say like asking for like feedback on educational programs, do you mean with like specifically with the grant, the stormwater grant program, or just kind of overall, or?
Just kind of overall, because this is more than just the residential stormwater grants program. We've started with single family homes there, and now we're encouraging more people to apply together. And from here, now that, we're getting a few years underneath our belt, we'd like to expand to larger scale and multi-family homes eventually, as we figure out how to do that. This is a program that's never been done before. It's been a challenge, but a good one. And I think that it's probably one of the first of its kind, really. So it's a growing experience. And through that, again, we're learning what needs to be done out there and how to address some of these programs before they, or rather these problems really before they happen. Get out ahead of it, be proactive, be preventative, and just helps everybody out, including, Angela and her programs, and Lauren and Dave with hers, and it's innovation. Bloomington's kind of ahead of the game here with this. Let's keep it going.
Yeah,
We're good. Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. This is super exciting, and like other members said, I think we're very willing and interested in collaborating with you both on this. So,
Awesome.
so definitely keep us updated on what you're doing, and we'll send you over ideas and comments or whatever as we come to them.
Right, and I'll update this list and get it to you as soon as possible as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have old business. So I think before we do the working group strategic planning, I think we will start with Colin's presentation, if he's ready to go.
Can folks hear me clearly?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. So hello, everybody. I'm Colin, Sustainability Commissioner here in Bloomington. I'm on the road and I'm outside here at a coffee shop. So my computer is connected and my phone is connected. My computer already lost its connection once. So my conditions for presenting are dubious today, but I'm going to try my best. If I need to, I could perhaps just present next month instead to do it justice. So, but let's try this. So, all right. Okay. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let us do this then. Okay. Okay, so hi everybody again. I wanted to bring to the commission the idea of a just transition working group today. And so the purpose of this working group is to focus on, when we think about sustainability originally is about ecology, ecological, how can I say this, coherence, if you will, economic viability, and social equity. I believe those were the three sort of original dimensions of sustainability, from my understanding. In my view, the social equity can be left out at times, right? It can be de-emphasized in public policy making. And so this working group would focus on, I would say, the economic and the social equity sides of sustainability. So yeah, why might a new working group be needed? What is the need here? So as a disclaimer, I'm not from Bloomington, as I think many of you know. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area in California. But that said, there are some similarities between my home region and Bloomington. A couple of those similarities would be that both regions have enormous gulfs of social inequality. Both regions have, I'd say, relatively high poverty rates as well. So poverty rose by 9% in Bloomington between 2010 and 2015. And in 2019, it was hovering at an estimated 35%. So, which is, of course, more than 1 in 3 residents. Now, there exist these community wealth building models or tools that municipal governments from the UK to the United States have implemented to great effect, actually, in order to empower especially like low-income residents in their jurisdictions. And so I'm specifically thinking of the Cleveland model in Ohio and the Preston model in the United Kingdom. And so one example that the Bloomington is actually already implementing under the mayor's directive is the city's Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI initiative, which is, in my understanding, a way of funding, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, a way of funding or incubating, I guess, nonprofits, or it's sort of like a micro-entrepreneurship kind of initiative, if I'm not mistaken, here in the city, which is pretty exciting. So I wanted to kind of, in my view, the community wealth building approach is a kind of systems thinking approach to building community wealth and to sort of rectifying inequality. The second purpose of the working group, and this might be too much, by the way, for one working group to handle, but I envision sort of two main foci, right? The first would be investigating community wealth building models, specifically the Cleveland model, and seeing if it could be applied here in Bloomington. And the second was to analyze our urban metabolism here in Bloomington. And what do I mean by urban metabolism? I mean all of the resources, all of the stuff and materials that come into the city, that the city consumes, and then all of the waste that comes out as a result of that metabolism, right? Because every city, every society, just like a human being, has a metabolism, right? It metabolizes inputs and it excretes outputs, if you will. And I'm thinking that, you know, urban metabolism studies is growing as a field globally. Studying our urban metabolism could help us to enhance Bloomington's climate action plan going forward, make it possibly even more rigorous. I don't know. But I would say that for the purposes of this pitch, the urban metabolism aspect would be secondary to the community, the Cleveland model investigation that I'm interested in. And again, so the purpose here again is, you know, we want to take material action on the third E of sustainability, which is equity and social justice, right? Bloomington is a forward-thinking community. It's a caring community. And yeah, I think there's probably potential and opportunity to sort of rectify this social inequality that is rather large here in town. I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of poverty rates in the biggest, or some of Indiana's largest cities. As you can see, in 2015, let's see here, Bloomington went from 29.6 to 38.2% from the beginning of the millennium to 2015. And so according to this source, the city of Bloomington had the highest poverty rate of any Indiana city, of any Hoosier city, or of this, sorry, excuse me, of this list of Hoosier cities in 2015. And that has decreased again to about 35% from my research so far. This is from a study by Riggs et al. So as I sort of alluded to earlier, the twofold purpose would be, or if we wanted to just focus on one of the two, that's fine. But my vision was for us to explore the Preston and Cleveland models for economic development. And there's a video here which the public and my fellow commissioners, city councilors are welcome to explore. It's a great 4 or 5 minute overview. I don't think I'm able to play it here and have the audio work. So, but this presentation is uploaded to our commission folder. And hopefully, Lauren, if it's possible, maybe we can make this presentation available for folks to look at, to refer to. And then the second purpose, right, is to research the concept and local application of urban metabolism analysis. And I'm thinking the two deliverables could be to prepare a set of reports and presentations on these two efforts, and then perhaps even present these things to the city council. And the possible names I'm thinking are, Just Transition and Urban Metabolism Working Group, or Just Transition Working Group. And why Just Transition? Well, building community wealth through the community wealth model of the Cleveland model. I think there's massive potential to begin to transition or aid the transition that Bloomington's already undergoing through its climate action plan to a post-carbon economy, right? Really quickly, because I can't play the video, I'm just going to explain as briefly as I can what the Cleveland model entails. So it's essentially, this has worked in cities that have what are called anchor institutions. So a large university, typically a hospital or a series of hospitals, and then the municipal government, so the local governments. These are called anchor institutions because they're seen as not likely to leave anytime soon, right? The Bloomington city government is probably not going anywhere. It's probably not going to leave town anytime soon, nor is Bloomington Hospital, IU Health Hospital, nor is Indiana University, or the flagship campus here in Bloomington. So the idea is to leverage the purchasing power of these anchor institutions by putting those purchasing power dollars in the community. So there is a structure, and I think it's in the next slide. Here it is. Okay. So the Cleveland model, right? So it's essentially this, it's a nonprofit organization that incubates worker-owned and managed cooperative businesses. And these businesses help to supply the anchor institutions with their everyday goods and services, if you will. So in the case of Cleveland, the evergreen cooperatives is what they're called. That's the sort of cooperative arm of the Cleveland model in that city. They have a laundry that I believe processes and cleans clothing, I think for the local hospital or something, or just for local anchor institutions. So there's just one example. There's a food production initiative as well, or business as part of the nonprofit arm, or excuse me, as part of the cooperative incubator arm, and so on and so forth. So, and the idea, right, is to build out that local economy, right, to create robust, well-paying jobs where workers have agency and workers have control over their workplaces in a way that empowers them, in a way that increases tenure, and ideally, again, these businesses would be, B corporations. They would be oriented towards sustainability, and the sort of guardrails or the principles that the businesses could operate on could be determined by the workers. It could be determined by the workers and the board of directors of this model, of a possible Bloomington version of this model. So some possible research questions would be the following: how can Indiana University Bloomington better leverage its economic might, right, to empower community members economically in possible partnership with the city government? I've gotten wind that the Indiana University Bloomington has more. There is potential for the university to do more for the local economy, to do more for the non-student, non-faculty population of Bloomington, and even the student population, arguably. And so another research question would be, what would a local application of the Cleveland model look like? Is there the political will to make it happen if folks think that it's a good idea? And then what are the key anchor institutions that the model could integrate? Those would have to be sort of formally investigated and established. In terms of the urban metabolism aspect of this working group, how long would it take to quantify Bloomington's urban metabolism? How might doing so benefit the community, especially when it comes to climate resilience and action planning? And then what insights does a UM or urban metabolism analysis of Bloomington provide to deepen our understanding of the city's ecological integrity or coherence in a global context, right? In other words, it's not just about carbon emissions, right? It's about, you know, every city, every society consumes, right, resources, and in the case of the United States, you know, we consume a lot of resources that come from the global South, right, or Africa, Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, and I think it's incumbent upon us, right, as folks thinking about sustainability, to consider the global impacts of our local consumption. In addition to the global impacts, of course, of our greenhouse gas emissions, and the two are, of course, very much so related. In terms of the relevance to the climate action plan, and in the climate economy section of the CAP, goal CE1 states that the city will work to build marketplace climate resilience, and a sub-strategy is to accelerate the transition to a carbon-free local economy. Another goal under that section is to attract, create, emphasis on create, and support businesses that are committed to sustainability and climate goals, right? Sub-strategies include increased workforce development for the climate economy. It's exactly what the Cleveland model is about. It's about training folks to perform well-paying jobs that are ideally low-carbon jobs that keep money in the community. And then another sub-strategy is support climate economy, economic development, and new business creation. And then there's some relevance to the comprehensive plan, which for the sake of time, I'll just gloss over. I would point to a couple passages here. The city itself has admitted that the poverty rate in town remains above that of comparable college towns of similar size. And then secondly, which I thought this was quite significant, employees must have a say in their workplaces and in the future of their economic sectors. I thought that was a very interesting line. That again, in my read, provides justification to a possible Bloomington model, Bloomington version of the Cleveland model. And then one of the outcomes of the comprehensive plan that the city ratified is that income inequality is reduced across and between all ages, races, and genders. That, I think, pretty much covers it. Any questions? Thank you all for your tolerance.
Alrighty,
Matt.
Matt.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
No, you're good. You call on people.
Okay.
Mute. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Colin. That was a terrific presentation. I'm familiar with the Cleveland model and think it's a great one. And you did such an excellent job explaining it and explaining the benefits, I think, of sort of well, not even relocalizing, but just empowering local workers in a cooperative model that builds wealth and autonomy
Right.
instead of sort of relying on what can be a more extractive kind of service economy. So that's awesome. I love this idea. I have been thinking about this some over time, though I haven't, it's one of those many ideas kind of percolating in the background that I haven't taken any concrete steps on really. I know there's some community groups that have talked a little bit about this, like local advocacy organizations, one of which I'm involved with. And just, so yeah, I support the idea of a group to kind of tackle this. I think it fits really well in the purview of BCOS, which can sometimes feel like it has a little bit of mission drift just because our purview is so expansive. Sure. So I like that a lot. I like you're tying it into the climate action plan and comp plan. And from a kind of political will perspective or that space, it strikes me as something that probably needs there may be legislative elements to this if it's mandating that the city set certain standards, for instance, on procurement or things like that. But I have a feeling there'd be a lot of also probably much more on the executive branch side in terms of its responsibility. So I think, if a group got started, definitely being, well in touch with Lauren and Alex Crowley, head of ESD, and the mayor, ideally, about whether this is something that could be explored is good. And then also those kind of softer political elements of trying to encourage other large institutions locally to partner on this sort of thing, right? So that's another really big piece of it. So yeah, lots of bridges to cross on those different items, but I think this is really great, and I do think that's a really promising model that's been developed in Cleveland in particular. I'm less familiar with the Preston model, but anyway, that's great. Thanks so much for the presentation.
Thanks a million for your comments, Matt. Great to hear that you like it. I think it was Christy next.
I'm going to pass because there's a couple hands up and I'm still formulating my question.
Okay. The next one I saw was Alicia, but correct me if I'm wrong, Jarrett, or facilitators. Yeah. Go for it, Alicia.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. I'm very similar thinking to you. I mean, this is definitely something that I'd be interested in helping you with. And I also think about this from like a local food resilience standpoint. That's kind of my area of focus. I'm a farmer. So I think about local food resilience and how this could fit into something like that. And I'm involved with some local groups that are kind of thinking this way already, like the People's Market and stuff like that. So definitely interested and would love to be in your working group.
Thanks, Alicia. And I wanted to refer back to something I think you said a couple meetings ago, which was, the need to kind of think big, or your interest in thinking big and acting big, if you will. And so yeah. I think that this complicated, but I think powerful project would be enormously impactful. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Najla, I think, isn't it?
Oh, thanks. Are you envisioning this working group to focus on more on equity, or in like economic justice, or in general, or specifically, is it just to develop, like this specific model? And what was and then there was a second part besides the model, you had something else. Oh yeah, that metabolism thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, like, how broad is this group's focus? Is it just like what you kind of said at the beginning in your intro, like, let's look at social, or I think you said economic, I don't know how you said it actually, equality or equity?
Yeah, I mean, I think economic justice is the idea, certainly.
Okay, yeah, justice, yeah. Economic justice. Yeah, I love this idea. I'm actually teaching a course on economic justice in an MBA program. So I love this idea. But like I said, my questions are just like, how broad and narrow is the focus? But in general, I love it. And I definitely want to join as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. And honestly, I think urban metabolism studies and the Cleveland model, I mean, there's some overlap, but I think that perhaps it might be too broad to fit both of those into an all volunteer working group, of this commission. So we may just want to focus on like the primary one, the primary idea, if you will.
Particularly I don't know how urban metabolism necessarily will inform us on questions of economic justice, but you probably know, and I'm sure there's a connection there that this is the first time I've heard of that.
Sure. Yeah, I think when I think about ecological justice, I think about the whole world, and we can't have a just transition just for Bloomington or just for the United States. Like, because the climate crisis is global, because those who bear the disproportionate responsibility for creating the climate crisis, for putting most of the carbon emissions in the atmosphere, are North America and Europe, right, and Japan. So, but especially the first two. So, yeah, so I feel like, you know, we have a disproportionate responsibility to think about the ways in which we can repay that debt, if you will. And so I think urban metabolism analysis would help us to deepen our understanding of the aggregate, the total material impact that Bloomington has on the whole world, like in terms of resource consumption, especially. But yeah, I mean, it's more of a research-based, it's less, that project is less about, you know, immediate economic gains per se. So yeah, certainly they're two quite different ideas, I would say. Yeah. But in terms of would we just focus on the model, Nesla, I think it could just be, the model could be one of our foci. You know, we could explore what are some other ways to build community wealth, you know, as well. So I think we could go in both directions. Though I think if we, researching the application of the Cleveland model here would be a big kahuna. It would be a huge task, I think. So I would just say that. I'm not sure who is next.
I can raise my hand unless someone officially raised their hand before me. Oh, someone did. Wait, my screen's, all right, I'm just gonna go for it. So yeah, I have like similar thoughts, everyone. Thank you for sharing that. That was great. And I'm just like very generally interested, although I admit my own kind of like ignorance, because some of these models, I'm like, I was like, oh, I should have like done some more homework on some of these things. Because I was like, ooh, I like this term urban metabolism, but I'm not familiar with it at all. So I kind of had 2 points. One, I thought like what might be helpful, because as you answered some questions, this helped, because you're talking about like just transition. And I was like, is this more like economic transition as it relates to like kind of like a new economy related to climate change and other like environmental resilience measures? Or so my first question was like, is the transition really focused on like economic equity or environmental? And it seemed like from your responses it was economic. Is that right? Or did I get that wrong?
I mean, yes.
It's both.
Well, I think it should be both, you know, like I think it should be both, and it can be both, you know, like the just transition is about it's about making sure that, you know, the transition to a post-carbon economy doesn't leave like fossil fuel workers behind, for example. But I interpret it to mean also like we're the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and I think we can end poverty. I'm not sure if we can do it just at the local level. I think definitely it's going to take the federal government, but in order to achieve sustainability, right, we have to eliminate poverty, in my opinion. We have to drastically reduce income inequality in this country. Like the link between economic justice and climate justice is very, very tight, in my opinion. But I think that there are ways, Christy, to if this were to be a Bloomington model, you know, to found it on the principles of economic justice and climate justice. I think there are ways to weave both in, you know, fundamentally.
Because I hear a lot of overlap, especially if you kind of go to those like old school definitions of like sustainability of like environmental, economic, social, or maybe I got those three wrong, but like it's so broad that it can feel unwieldy. So my only thought was like for this working group to really come up with something that's like very like measurable and maybe even like small for like a 3-month goal or a 6-month goal, and then like what those goals would be, because I feel like it would hopefully grow over time and hit some of those like really big kind of systemic design elements, but coming up with what that looks like in terms of like the reports or the deliverables for like the next 3 to 6 months, I think could be really useful.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. We want to start with manageable chunks, and I think, you know, if we were to approve this working group, the first step would be reaching out to the Democracy Collaborative, because they are very much so, they've done a lot of the I think they've done a lot of the heavy lifting around making these models happen. And then just reaching out to the cities of Cleveland and maybe Preston to just have a conversation, perhaps, to learn more. I think Joseph is next.
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well, Colin, for that presentation. That was really good and really informative. And I also want to bring up the fact that one of the agenda items that we have listed is just the general working group strategic planning, which I know everyone's brain is very much in right now. But everyone's brain, I believe, is very much in one strategic group line of thought. And one thing that came to my attention as I was going through the ideas for brainstorming file that Alicia had prepared was the reference that Lauren had made at last month's meeting about existing call outs to the BCOS in existing city planning. And I just want to highlight the importance of the fact that the commission already has quite a bit of, activities that's it's able to be engaged in as specified in existing plans, and just to encourage commissioners to keep that in mind when thinking about this plan as well, and that there are already a lot of activities that the city calls on us for, and that I know, Colin, your plan does sound really good for the presentation, but also very time hungry as well, as you had mentioned. So just something I want to encourage people to keep in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's a vital point. Capacity. I think Matt was next.
I took my hand down. I had a few additional comments, but I don't need to share them at this time. I think we can move on.
Cool. Did anyone else have a comment? I didn't see any other hands. All right, well, if not, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Colin. That was a really, really great presentation, well researched and well put together. So next on our agenda, as Joe alluded to, is a brainstorming, I guess, time around working groups. So every so often, I guess BCOS just kind of needs to kind of, we need to come together and discuss what our focus is going to be for the next year or next, 6 months or next 2 years or whatever we choose it to be. In the working groups that we are currently have established were created when most of you weren't on the commission. So I think it might be time to, create some new working groups or kind of refine the mission of existing working groups. So yeah, and with that, I'll just kind of open it up and we can kind of start a dialogue. So yeah, use the raise hand feature and we'll see if that works for facilitating this conversation. So Joe, looks like you're first.
Thanks, Jared. I do just want to also start with a point of order with respect to quorum. I think we need to revisit roll call since we have members join late, and I'm not sure if we have a quorum right now if we were to make any decisions.
Yeah, so let me see here. So because Anna, Colin, and Nachla joined during the presentation, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I believe we have quorum now. For voting, because I guess my question is, do Matt and Nolan count for quorum? Yes.
Yeah, we're both voting members.
Yeah. So then we definitely hit quorum, because also one of our seats is vacant right now. So yeah. Okay. So we're good to discuss and make it. Sorry, I muted myself.
Excellent, thank you. And then the other thing that I wanted to open up with was just to verify that commissioners were able to review the existing charges that I had added to the ideas for brainstorming file to get some, just I guess to maybe, I would encourage starting there with the ideas of where the BCOS's activities are going to go to make sure that we're aligned with what is already expected And I was also hoping to follow up with existing commissioners or members who were present for some of the goals that were listed as pending or in progress or targeted for 2020, just to find out where those items lie, in particular with the Sustainability Action Plan. There were goals 1.1, 2.1, 5.1, C and D that were all listed in the 2019 review as in progress or 2020 focus, to see if those still need to be incorporated into our activities.
Can I recommend sharing the screen just because we are looking at a document? Maybe we can all look at the same document together.
Jarrett, do you prefer that I share the screen or that you do?
Go right ahead if you want to.
All right. It seems to be disabled at the moment.
Here, let me see. I think Lauren might have to give that permission. Let me see.
One
Okay,
second.
cool. Thanks, Lauren.
Excellent, thank you, Aaron.
Joseph used to be a co-host now.
All right, is the window visible? All right. So essentially it's just, so these are the currently listed items for BCOS within the Sustainability Action Plan and the Climate Action Plan. And it was these three items in particular, numbers 1 through 3 from the Sustainability Action Plan, that I was interested in learning more about the status of, or where we could find out that status to see if that needs to be incorporated into this commission's activities, so we can conclude those items that were scheduled to be achieved in these target times.
I can give an update. So for 1.1B and 2.1B, those can be considered complete with both the completion of the greenhouse gas inventory and the climate action plan in terms of the community renewable energy goal. So those are no longer things that need to be finished. For the first one, 1.1B, through the process of creating that cap, we determine what pace and process or progress we need to make on increasing solar across the community. Second one, monitoring and reporting community-wide energy use is only possible through requests for utility data from Duke and Vectren. So we are doing that on an annual basis and reporting that on a dashboard. So I would consider those two substantively complete, but goal 5.1C, that's really what the waste reduction working group was sort of molded around. And I would say that that continues to be a big focus, especially with the increased generation of waste that has occurred during the pandemic.
Thank you, Lauren.
And then as to 5.1D, there were some efforts to look into a variety of different business certification programs. A lot of them result in some costs associated, or maybe weren't specific enough to Bloomington. So there wasn't a ton of traction that's occurred on that one. But I wouldn't say that it's off the table. There was some looking at different standards by which businesses measure their own environmental impact in ways that perhaps the commission could be helpful in evaluating those metrics. But I think mostly it was just a series of conversations that kind of got derailed during the pandemic.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay, I think I will conclude my remark by adding that I also do have interest, I think analogous to Colin's interest in the proposed just transition plan. Mine would be a focus on waste management working group that was in place, and to kind of take advantage of, as I mentioned, some other city goals of interest and called out other targets that I think it would be interesting and appropriate for the B Coast to continue to focus on. And I'll turn it back over to the floor to anyone else who has contributions.
Najla?
Hi, are you suggesting that the working groups should be structured according to the city charges? Is that what you're suggesting, Joe? Because I didn't understand that that's what our working groups were for necessarily, but obviously that's an option to us. Is this what you're suggesting, that we organize working groups according to this organization that you're showing?
I would say not exclusively, but like I had mentioned following Colin's presentation, that it just seems like an important thing to keep in mind, given that that's something that the city is interested in achieving and has listed as specific goals, and is interested in having the commission engage with as well. And some things in particular with relation to the Sustainability Action Plan from 2018 seems logical to follow through on existing goals rather than setting the previously defined goals by another hardworking body, you know, that spent time and thought on coordinating them and organizing them, and then putting those to the side and then starting over with our own. Not to say that we can't do that, but just something I think worth mentioning, carries weight, and that I am personally taking into consideration.
Okay, and just to follow up, I feel that I don't feel that having working groups, I don't feel that our working groups need to be focused on or need to be organized by, you know, sustainability action plan, climate action plan, for instance, in order for us to achieve these objectives. And I feel like, for instance, just throwing the idea out there because it's a brainstorming session, I feel like if we had a working group for economic justice per se, that we could very just as well achieve all these goals, or many of them, right, in keeping with that, but with a view to also prioritize, or to make sure within these, you know, because obviously with all of these goals, there are many ways to achieve them. And so it would help, you know, kind of steer the way we are achieving them towards maybe what our particular members are more interested in, or more, let's say, qualified, frankly, you know, to talk about, or to help provide information on. So I just want to say, I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think we necessarily need to organize working groups by, you know, these plans per se in order to achieve the objectives. That's all. Thanks.
And Jared, if I may make one more follow-up remark to that. Thank you, Najla. I just wanted to add that the Climate Action Plan does just specify establishing the Commission on Sustainability as the main citizen body to support implementation of the Climate Action Plan. So pretty much all of the goals in there, I think that would still fall under that purview that you just described. And I just think that we can take advantage of the collaboration of a large number of participants on that project, and some consulting as well, to leverage our involvement in those defined goals. Thanks.
All right, I think Christy was next.
Yeah, for the sake of time, I'll try to just make it brief. I definitely understand where you're coming from, Joe, because that was also my question of like knowing just like natural turnover of this commission, like starting a brand new initiative when there's already been a lot of work to identify like gaps or needs in the community, whether those gaps are identified by the city or whoever else, I think could be kind of like a smart way to approach like getting the most bang for our buck in terms of our capacity for the next year. And so I guess that was actually a question I had for like Lauren and Matt. Like, are there any like certain goals that have been like, if we can do these three things in Bloomington, like we think that they'll have the biggest impact on climate emissions or income inequality? Like, are there any things that like of the 30 things on this ideas for brainstorming list that we think would be like the most kind of like bang for our buck, because that would be personally what I would be most interested in.
I'll jump in since Lauren wasn't, if that's okay, Jarrett. And just, I don't know if that type of like quantification or analysis has been done, Christy, to sort of say, you know, these 3 actions or these particular actions will be most impactful. I just had a conversation with Lauren and Alex both last week, kind of to talk a little bit about next steps for the CAP, and like, you know, there's these phase 1 and phase 2 targets, and like, what's it going to look like to support legislative initiatives specifically is kind of what I was asking, how they want to work on that, you know, jointly with the council and their departments. And I think commissions, you know, at their own initiative or interest, and in particular this commission, could be involved in some of those things too, if they wanted to. Kind of ruminating on what Najla and Joe both said, I do take Joe's point that it's like important to make sure that we're fulfilling our mission as a, you know, as a commission and actually following up on the goals. So I think the updates from Lauren on a few of those were helpful. And if we do have working groups, making sure that they're at least able to cover, you know, the goals that we have specifically called out for BCOS is important. You know, but I guess in terms of thinking what the commission is well suited to tackle, I feel like, and maybe this by way of anecdote will kind of help just illustrate what I mean. I was involved when I was on the commission as a resident in 2019. I think Najla too, and maybe a few others. Well, probably it was just us that are still around from that. You know, we're working on the sustainable business certification idea. And we had, you know, a fair number of meetings over a year, and kind of the basic recommendation or outcome was it makes no sense for a volunteer, you know, run commission to establish and operate in an ongoing fashion a certification program that would require measuring and verification and communication. Like that's a you know, that's something that requires staff capacity, and moreover is probably duplicating or recreating rather work that exists out there. And what we kind of came to is that the B Corp model is a really good model for certifying businesses. And Lauren kind of mentioned, I think this was a reference to it, that, you know, some of those certification programs have costs, and the B Corp program is, you know, can be kind of a high bar, $1,000, $2,000 for a 2-year certification, depending on the size of your business and that sort of thing. There's examples of cities that provide grants to incentivize that sort of thing. And we did kind of have some initial talks, even with the developers of the SAP, as well as I think maybe someone from the chamber, to kind of talk about like whether we could move forward with that. And I kind of think we reached the end of the road a little bit on that, exploring that possibility with kind of the idea of where to go next. Maybe it should have been more formalized as a recommendation, you know, or a resolution of this commission, and it never quite got there. But I kind of share that to A, as an update on goal 5.1D, you know, in a little more detail, but B, to kind of make sure that we're thinking in our working group discussion and brainstorm here about what is feasible for this body and what a final product might look like. There was a comment in the chat from Anna that I thought was really great, which is establishing, you know, goals, timelines, and deliverables would probably really help those working groups to not kind of languish. You know, if those need to be extended or whatever, that's fine, but actually articulating and keeping those things more explicit would probably be a good thing. And, you know, harkening back to Colin's presentation about the Cleveland model, like that's probably not something that BCOS sees through in full and utter completion on its own, right? It's probably like an initial researching set of recommendations, and then a need to move on to like some collaborative work with maybe the Economic Development Commission of the city or other, you know, maybe other the BEDC or the CDFI friendly Bloomington and other community partners who make sense on that. So that was kind of a lot, just kind of my 2 cents on yeah, how best to think about these working groups going forward, given some of the challenges and limitations of, you know, a volunteer citizen commission and what we're empowered to do or what we don't have the power to do. So I hope that's like at least a little bit useful to some folks in thinking about some of these things. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Alrighty, Alicia.
Yeah, just to add on to that, thinking about what is the capacity of a group like this, a volunteer run group, would you say that policy recommendations would be the most effective use of a group like this? Or is there something else? Like, I mean, I'm trying to think, what else can a volunteer run group do? To me, it's like policy, or yeah, I don't know what else. Are there other like things that we can actually do?
I'll just do
Matt,
a quick
answer.
Yeah, quick follow-up. I mean, I think commissions, it gets to working, again, just kind of capacity a little bit, but actually not just a recommendation on something to implement, but like you all can be involved in drafting legislation, developing legislation, finding, you know, a council member or a staff member who is on board with moving something in that direction. That's definitely been done with other commissions, develop fairly comprehensive, you know, ordinances and policies for the city, and do that collaboratively. And so, you know, that's somewhere called out on here is a goal from the CAP about, you know, phasing out gas powered blowers or lawn equipment. There was a presentation of Environmental Commission last month, and I want us, because this is a citizen's been really pushing for this with some others over the last few years. It's something I'm trying to explore. And I think you know, a small ad hoc kind of group of myself, the few citizens who've been engaged on this really strongly, and, you know, a BCOS member and an EC member might be a good example. That's not a working group necessarily, but that's another way for BCOS to plug directly into the legislative process and policymaking in that way. So I think something as direct as that can be taken on by the commission as well, not just sort of making a static, you know, or kind of an end goal policy recommendation. And then I think outreach and other things like that, of course, too, you know, community education initiatives. That's definitely something we've been involved with in the past.
Alicia, did you have a follow-up comment or question?
I think you clarified what I was thinking.
So I guess what I would say we should do now is, I guess I would entertain a motion to create a working group in the vein of, you know, the waste reduction subcommittee, or to continue it as Joe mentioned, or to create a working group in the vein of a just transition and Colin's presentation. I don't really know. I agree with what's been said. I think we have to be more clear with these than we have in the past about like what we're expecting to get out of them. And I think that Colin's presentation did a really good job of, you know, we're going to have these two, you know, reports that we're going to put out and present them to the council. I think that's a good goal. And we can kind of see how it goes from there. You know, it may take longer than expected or shorter than expected to get those reports. But I think that's a good use of our time to create those sort of things, and those can serve as resources for future, you know, iterations of BCOS, or for the city council, or for the environmental commission. So yeah, those are my thoughts. And I would entertain those motions. So, Joe.
Before making such a motion, are BCOS commissioners hardly or directly associated with working groups, or are working groups fluid in the sense of there aren't assigned or designated members? To whomever can respond.
Yeah, I generally, at least from my experience, and I joined BCOS in like August of 2019, so I haven't been around for that many like working groups, but in the past, I think people were kind of like, you had a designated working group that you were kind of working under, but they weren't necessarily like, you know, you could only work for this one. Like if you were interested in both, you could definitely do both, or, you know, certain people moved between them as like the focus has changed. And that would be something I think maybe we should also discuss, of how we want to structure them, just because, you know, having these rigid working groups, I think have benefits, but I think they also have, you know, drawbacks in terms of keeping people engaged. So yeah. Matt, if you want to comment.
Yeah, just a brief note too that because when they had a lot of work on its plate some years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, they started meeting twice a month. Some of you are probably all around when we got rid of that second meeting recently, because it was like a BCOS work session, and it just had become functionally like another BCOS meeting. We were meeting every 2 weeks instead of once a month, and it wasn't really making much of a difference in terms of productivity. But that second session was initially set up to be more of a time to dig in and do some work, and we talked about that being a time that is probably available for folks and might be a good time for working groups to get together. On the fourth Tuesday at 6. But of course, it could be up to working groups too, and whoever's involved with them to figure out the best time for them all for them to meet. But just thought I mentioned that.
In the interest of time, I'd love to make a motion to create a just transition working group and continue the waste reduction working group, and just kind of establish those as 2 groups, and then go ahead and possibly at the end of tonight's meeting get just a list of kind of who wants to be on which. So sorry, that was a long motion, but I moved to kind of establish those 2 groups for now, with the possibility of maybe adding another group next month.
Is there a second? We got Joe's second. So those working groups are established, and I like Anna's idea of kind of us talking, I guess, about which ones we're primarily interested in engaging with. So I guess that would probably fall most under new business. So
just sorry, as a point of order, Jarrett, we should probably either take a roll call vote on the motion, or at least see if anyone has any objections in order to consider it approved via any unanimous consent. So up to you. Sorry.
Yeah, let's do a roll call vote. So I'll read through the names of, I guess I'll just read the names of the BCOS members that are here. So yeah, you can vote yes, no, or abstain. So I'm first. I vote yes. Colin.
Aye.
Joe.
Yes.
Christy.
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Najla. Najla, are you there?
Yes.
Cool. And did I miss anyone?
Me.
Oh, sorry. You were on the top of my, okay. Alicia, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, and it's Alicia, just so everyone knows.
Oh, Alicia, sorry.
No worries.
Alrighty, so those were formally approved. So then moving on our agenda, we have the working group updates of our kind of old, which work with the waste reduction is continuing. But so if anyone from the waste reduction working group has an update for us, please raise your hand and we can hear that. Joe, if you want to go.
Yeah, I'll just note that the working group didn't convene during the bi-week period between meetings, so there's nothing more to update as of now.
All right, and then the policy working group. I don't know if anyone here is on that working group, so. Matt, if you want to.
I am not on that working group. So if someone is, please jump in. But I was going to say that working group seemed much more kind of open-ended and or like take on, a project, like any given project kind of that comes across, and was, I think, tasked with kind of looking more at things that were happening to council and that sort of thing. And it might be a good idea, like that might be the kind of thing that is a little more ad hoc or fluid with legislative items of interest to BCOS that folks can kind of just get involved on. I'll try to, really keep the commission informed of opportunities like that, and think of the commission as one that can be involved on those types of things, and might be good to just kind of let it dissolve its formal designation and kind of take that up in a more ad hoc way. That's all, just a thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having these two these two, working groups that are established, and then, generally we do have three, but just kind of leaving that third slot open for, whatever need arises. For example, we could have created an ad hoc working group around the housing resolution that Najla wrote, or something of the sort. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Jared, could I just make one more point? If everyone wants to, if it's easiest, to let me know which group you're interested in. I'm happy. I just updated our roster of commissioners, so I'm happy to update that information. That way, folks can contact one another if they'd like to start doing that. So feel free to just let me know in the chat if that makes sense, and I'm happy to update our Google Sheet.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. Okay, and then next on our agenda is new business. So if anyone has any new business, raise your hand and we'll go through that. So Matt?
I suppose this would qualify, is like forward thinking about these new groups. I wonder if it's not too much to suggest that perhaps both could, try to meet before next BCOS meeting and at least think a little bit about kind of scope of focus and timelines of, just some initial thinking on those things. So just a suggestion again.
Yeah, and something that also might be helpful in regard to those would be, I guess, to not necessarily appoint like a leader or anything, but somebody who can send out that first email and get the ball rolling in terms of meeting. So maybe once everyone has let Anna know their preferences, we can just kind of go over who wants to be in each, and then somebody can volunteer. That way we have a set person who's going to be sending out that email to each group. Joe?
Thank you. I do want to mention that I would be interested in leading the waste reduction working group if there's no competition for that. And as for the new business, I did want to bring up a question. I think is an important one that needs to be addressed before our next meeting. And that is, there's been a change, state legislation change to electronic attendance at public meetings, House Enrollment Act number 1437, that states that, well, first, it's moot until the governor's emergency protocol is in place, but that is set to end at May 31st. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't have electronic enrollment or electronic engagement in meetings. It would be back to in-person unless we proactively adopt a statement that states that we permit the new electronic attendance permissions by the state. So I wanted to see where BCOS stood on that in terms of getting that resolved before the next meeting in the off chance that the emergency regulations are no longer in place. Or if anyone else is even familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, so before we move on to Colin's comment, if anybody has a comment in response or about what Joe just brought up, feel free to indicate that. Matt?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Joe. Actually, we do have a resolution in the works at the council level related to that change in Indiana code and allowing some form of electronic attendance and conducting business in that way. And it's in draft form right now, but we're hoping to finalize it pretty soon. And I believe it's meant to be structured in a way that any board or commission that wouldn't like to make use of the same policy could adopt it as well. So hopefully by next meeting, that's something that we could do. It's not ready yet for adoption today. So it might be something we need to consider next time. But yeah, definitely something to be thinking about.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe and Matt. Colin?
Can you all hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I had another idea. So sorry to take up so much space today, y'all. But I had another idea, much, I guess, probably more minor, if you will, than than the Just Transition Working Group. But so I come from the city of Oakland, and Oakland implemented its 2030 Equitable Climate Action Plan last year. What I found really significant about it was that they ratified an 88 page racial equity impact assessment. And so this assessment was developed in partnership with a consultant in order to kind of guide the city's understanding of how the climate action plan, what the climate action plan needs to do to address the very deep, racial inequities in the city of Oakland. And so I'm actually in my research job for IU. I'm studying municipal climate action plans and their equity components, and I haven't come across any city that has put together an 88-page report on racial equity to sort of as an attaché, to their climate action plan. And so I wanted to bring the idea to you all of having my friend and colleague Colin Miller, who is a longtime climate justice organizer and helped put together this racial equity impact assessment, to come speak to us, maybe for 30 or so minutes, on just the RIA, we call it the RIA itself, the process of creating it, why they created it, and how it could maybe potentially be applied here in Bloomington. So I wanted to maybe, if we could open the floor, if we have time, if folks wanted to opine on that idea. And the second component of my comment would be, would it be possible to secure funding to pay Colin or his partner to make this presentation, if folks here were interested in that? Thanks.
Hey, Colin, we're starting to get over. We're at 7:38, so I was wondering if we could bring this up as new business at the next meeting, but it's up to everyone else about whether they want to continue.
I was actually going to move to do precisely that, to take up this at next month's new business.
Sounds great.
Does anyone second Joe's motion?
Second.
Cool. So with that, we are finished with our agenda. Unless anyone has any pressing comments before we adjourn. Joe?
Just a quick point of order on the motion, that if we need to, well, there should be a vote or an approval of the motion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so does anyone have any objections to Joe's motion? All right, seeing none, it is adopted unanimously. So then, any last minute comments before? Alrighty, so I just want to thank you all again for bearing with me. I'm still learning the ins and outs of how to lead these meetings. I think the raise hand function worked okay at this meeting. But again, if you think that you have a system that works better, or you want to try something at the next meeting, just send me an email and let me know. I'm open to, trying or considering anything that, makes this meeting more accessible and flows, smoother. But with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Alrighty, any objections? Okay, seeing none, it is adopted unanimously. Take care, everyone. See you next month, okay?